Hello everyone, welcome to our session. Me and my colleague Mohammed will be presenting to you today how to run RKE2 clusters on Harvester with the use of Cluster API. We'll be doing a small lab here today. We initially planned to provision a lot of environments so everyone can try it out, but unfortunately we bumped into some resource quota on the environment where we plan to do the demo, so instead of a lab, this will be like a live demo because we only have one Harvester cluster, unfortunately. But still, our goals for today is to show you how you can run RKE2 clusters on Harvester. These are both products from SUSE, and we are also developing Cluster API providers for them. So we wanted to show you how easy and convenient it is to do your cluster management using these tools and also Rancher. So our agenda, I will present what is Cluster API to you briefly, then we will look into different types of Cluster API providers, and then more deeply into RKE2 and Harvester provider. Then my colleague Mohammed will show you the lab, and then we can answer your questions. So briefly about what Cluster API is. So Cluster API is a tool. It's a upstream project from the Kubernetes 6. It allows you to manage the life cycle of, yesterday there was a talk from two of our colleagues who were doing a deep dive into Cluster API, so I will be quicker than them, but if you want to get deeper into it, please watch their talk. So Cluster API, Kubernetes 6 tool for cluster lifecycle management. Essentially use Kubernetes and Kubernetes APIs to manage our Kubernetes cluster. So there is a concept of management cluster that runs CAPI. CAPI is just like a set of controllers and CRDs, and then you can manage your workload clusters using them. You can think of CAPI as a Swiss knife for your cluster lifecycle management, and it provides a single operational model, which means no matter which platform you're running your clusters, you'll have the same experience. CAPI has a couple type of providers, which are the building blocks of the Cluster API and how to use it. And there are many other providers, but we'll be specifically talking about three of them today. And before we jump into providers, I will explain how to create a cluster. So the workflow is you define your YAML definition with the cluster. With the cluster configuration, you also have to configure your bootstrap provider, which will initialize the workers and the control planes. So it's essentially what transforms your instance into a Kubernetes node, and there is also a part for configuring your infrastructure. So CAPI will take care of interacting with, let's say, if you work on AWS, CAPI will take care of provisioning all like networks, VPCs, and so on for you. So what is a CAPI provider? Well, let's get more into that. There are a couple CAPI provider types, as I said, but the most important ones and the required ones are bootstrap providers, infrastructure providers, and control plane providers. And actually bootstrap providers and control plane providers often come together in most of the cases because they are related. So the job of a bootstrap provider is to give you an API so you can, let's say, configure your RKE2 in the same way as you're used currently to work with it. So we'll expose mostly, like maybe I think almost all options that are there for your typical RKE2 configuration. So you can do this in a declarative manner. And the control plane provider is the provider that manages control plane objects, because control planes are harder to manage than workers. It requires a separate resource. So control plane and bootstrap provider usually work together to get you working control plane. And the infrastructure provider is a provider that provisions everything, like anything you need on your environment, and is also responsible for managing hosts in many cases. And it also needs the user data provided by the bootstrap provider, so your host knows how to boot your Kubernetes. So a bit closer look of what is CAPI RKE2 and CAPI HV. It's our abbreviation of how we call the providers. For CAPI RKE2 is RKE2 and CAPI HV is Harvester. So these are both providers that were developed at SUSE. CAPI RKE2 will get you an RKE2 cluster. So yeah, as I said previously, we expose mostly all of the options that are there for your usual config that you can find on the RKE2 documentation page. If you want to configure a cluster, there are a set of fields, and we try to expose most of them. We also support both Cloud Init and Ignition. The project is in a ready shape, so you can all try it out. The RKE2 provider, we invested a lot of time in it, so we believe it's a good tool. And the Harvester provider is a very early stage. It was started by Mohammed as his Hack Week project, and then it evolves into something bigger. So it's still not ready. It's ready to be tested, but probably not ready to be used. So only for enthusiasts. I don't think I have anything else for the presentation. We are not doing a deep dive into CAPI, unfortunately, today. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer now. So.
Okay. So yeah. So how will we do the lab? In this case, so it will not be a lab, unfortunately, because of these technical issues that we had. The idea is that I wanted to show you how you can use Rancher to deploy the Rancher Turtles extension, and then to declare in the Rancher Turtle extension the Harvester provider as a non-official provider coming like from the community at this point, and then deploy a cluster based on that provider plus RKE2. That means we will use Rancher Turtles to deploy RKE2 on Harvester using Cluster API. So we did have issues. It will be a demo. However, in this case, even the demo will be a little bit problematic because the whole infrastructure did not work correctly at Equinix. Just as a background, I had very high hopes about this workshop. I had actually wanted to deploy 40 clusters for each of you to test, and I wanted to use Equinix bare metal cloud to do that. And unfortunately, I came across rate limitations everywhere. Like literally 2 hours ago, I had 5 clusters working. As I pushed that into 10, everything crumbled down. But anyway, it's the the randomness of this kind of stuff. So let's go ahead, and I will try here to share my screen. So you see here, all of that was done literally 30 minutes ago, okay? So this ID was supposed to be your unique ID, and here is a Rancher installation with Harvester behind. So you can see that it's a standard Rancher. If I click here on virtualization management, I find my Harvester cluster, which is on Equinix. If I click on it, I can see it. It's a machine with 16 cores, 64 gigabytes of RAM. So it's actually a bare metal machine in the cloud. What will not work in this case is that I need some infrastructure for DHCP, which I couldn't have because of this problem. But anyway, we will continue, and we will do the first part of the whole thing, which is installing Rancher Turtles, define the CAPI provider, and then we can have maybe a discussion, and I might try to make it work in between, but the idea is to do first that. Okay, so installing Rancher Turtles should be quite simple. Actually, I have a generated instruction guide that you might want to look at if you go to this GitHub repo and you select one of the branches. Okay, so it's very simple. SUSECon participant repo under this organization, which is my username. Okay, I might want to share that, but anyway. So inside you will have an extensive guide with screenshots and stuff on how to do this. And you can do, if my setup works again, I can make it, I can show it to you. Okay, so in this case, so you have a link to SUSE, which we have here, and we will install using that guide, right? So there is a UI way of basically adding a catalog in Rancher, but I prefer copy-paste because I'm very lazy, okay? So I will go here, then open a prompt in the Rancher local cluster, which should open this to me, and I just have to paste this, which will add my catalog. Now, I can add an app, which I could have done using the copy-paste side, but it's a lot of text, so I will just go here, select Turtles, and install Turtles. It happens that for this guide previously we had issues with the 0.8 because 0.8, as mentioned in yesterday's session, comes with like a new API version for the RKE2 provider, which did not work correctly with our templates for the Harvester provider. So the 0.7, however, works correctly. So we will select that, install. Here it's important to not choose a project because right now there are some small issues with selecting the project here. So we will go ahead and install Rancher Turtles. Yeah, so at some point here we usually need to refresh because there are some webhooks that are, yeah, so I need to go completely out of here like this. And maybe wait for a second for it to... Okay, coming back. Okay, so at this point, we should have Rancher Turtles installed. For me, one of the easiest ways to check that everything is working is to go to CAPI providers. You will see, you might be surprised at seeing that there's nothing, because here at Rancher, you might know that if you use Rancher extensively, you need to change the view to all net namespaces. So whenever you do that, you will see the current state of our CAPI providers. These ones are being deployed. They were in failed state and moved into the ready state just a minute ago. Now unavailable, but we can wait a little bit longer, and there should be ready soon. Okay. Yeah. And now you see all of these providers are running. You can also continue to check that Rancher Turtles is running by going into the workloads deployments, and here select cluster. You will see all the ones that come with Rancher Turtles, which are the CAPI controller manager, the Rancher Turtles cluster API operator, and the both RKE2 control plane and bootstrap providers. Okay, so 4 components all in all. Now we will add an additional component for the CAP-HV, or the Harvester CAPI provider. And again, since I do have an instruction guide with some code inside, I can just drop that in. What it will do, you can check here, it's actually using Fleet Git repo. So what it will do is it will not just put the CAPI provider as an object. It will actually create a Git repo for the CAPI provider, and I'm using that just because I knew I would have some new versions in the CAP-HV because of all this thing. So I wanted to take the latest version using Fleet. So I copy that, and then again open a kubectl shell, and I paste this thing here. It creates the Git repo, and if I'm patient enough, I will see the CAPI controller manager coming up. Have to wait a little bit. The version that is used here is 0.14, which was released during KubeCon before yesterday because of some fixes that I had to do. And now it's active. Okay, so now if we go into the CAPI resources, you cannot see them here because there is no actual cluster, but I can now create Harvester machine clusters, which is specific to an infrastructure provider. Okay, so now at this point, in my guide, if I go further, I will see that the CAPHV projects provide us with this template for creating an RKE2 cluster on top of Harvester. It has inside of it, it has placeholders for things like, do we want to automatically import the cluster in Rancher using Rancher turtles, or like the cluster name and stuff like that. So we need something to initialize all these variables so that our cluster would be created successfully. Okay, so all of that, again, automation, I wanted to have it available to you. So my automation should create a file that is here, which would, for this particular ID and environment, it will provide you with the necessary information to deploy your cluster. So you see here I have this thing. Already I can see that my automation did not work correctly because here my cloud config is empty. So it cannot work. And it cannot work because of other reasons. But anyway, let's just copy paste this thing and put it on a machine. Actually, I do have also a machine here. Where is it? Yeah, I do have access to a router VM, which was supposed to be the VM on which you can generate the YAML file for the cluster. So I will access that. Yeah, I can clear. Sorry if it's too small. Okay, so interesting. Oh, naturally, the VM did not deploy. I'm sorry, problem of automation. Okay, so I will do it from my own machine, no problem. I have cluster.ctl here. Okay, I need this CLI tool to generate the final YAML file. You remember the template having variables inside? We need to replace these. So we need to set up a number of environment variables and then run a cluster.ctl command, which is actually here. So I have my file. Oh, where is it? Sorry. I'll open it again from here. Exactly. So the commands to execute, you should have a disposal list of commands to execute. It's here. Okay. I'm copying this into my terminal. Okay. So this is set. The only thing is that this cloud config, but anyway, and the VM that doesn't exist. And then I'm running a cluster.ctl generate YAML command. And I'm putting all of that into this file that I'm calling test.rk cluster YAML. Okay? I can check out this file after generation. And you can see that we don't have any placeholders anymore. We don't have these variables that we had in the template on the upstream GitHub project. Okay? So I replaced everything, and this should be your final YAML file that you should use. Okay? So now we have two ways of deploying our cluster. Either we take the content of this YAML file and we push it, or we can also use GitOps. Like if we push this YAML file into a Git repository that is declared in Fleet, as being monitored, it will deploy that automatically for us. Okay? So shall we do this? Okay, let me check that. My fleet is actually somewhere. Yeah, it's in Suzacon. But yeah. So Suzacon, okay. And then the Suzacon CAPI demo. Yeah, and it should be in the templates. And I will actually rerun that. I will remove this older file and actually rerun the clusterctl command here. Okay, and now I can see that I can do some changes. So I'm gonna add everything. Okay, and then I'm gonna commit. Okay, putting a new cluster YAML. Okay, and now I can push. So now I have my, okay. Okay, so now I have a, yeah, sorry, you should not do this in production, right? Yeah, so going back here, I have to declare my GitHub repo or Git repo. I can do it naturally the manual way, which in this case I might do because it's actually the same repo as this one, but in another folder. So what I will say is just I will clone this one, and I put here, it's the cluster, go down a little bit, and instead of this CAPI providers, I would put templates, and I will remove these things that are just coming from the clone. Okay, and I will create this repo, and as you can see, it began applying 15 resources, and must be the cluster is already created for some reason, but anyway, let me check out here if I do have resources created. Yeah, so I see that there is a CAPI cluster that was created as an object right now, so no actual machines behind. And I do have also these machines. Am I doing it with the right one, or? Yeah, okay. And I see some machines. The only thing that is a little bit surprising to me right now is that I don't see the Harvester machines. Give me a second. Harvester. Okay, there should be Harvester machine. Yeah, okay. So there are also these Harvester machines, which are basically the infrastructure-specific machine object that is supposed afterwards to create VMs on Harvester. And if I go to Harvester, though my whole setup is not exactly working well, yeah, the VMs were not yet created, but what it will do is it will create VMs in Harvester, etc. So right now, because of my whole automation stuff that didn't work, unfortunately, the demo will not work as is. However, it's up to you. We still have time, I think, or yeah, we still have time. So either you have questions for us, or we can try to do a live troubleshooting session. So tell me, yeah, do you have questions? Just to clarify, actually this thing did work on the first 5 clusters that I mentioned before. I tested the demo this morning. As I wanted to push into 10 clusters, that's where everything crumbled. But actually it does work, sorry. Yeah. Any questions? Are there any people here who have experience with Cluster API? Yeah? For which infrastructure are you using it? Metal Cubed? Yeah? Which one? vSphere. Yeah, cool. And you probably are thinking about, maybe replacing some of VMware with Harvester, right? Okay. Yeah. The CAPHV, or the CAPI provider for Harvester, is relatively young, but really we are pushing this because we know that there is a lot of success from the Harvester perspective. There is an opportunity. Our customers are wanting it, so that's why we are putting this effort even with our limited resources. But yeah, if you have any big interest in this, I'm personally very motivated to listen to your feedback on the provider. I actually can also share with you the different links. These 2 addresses are, the first one is for the CAPI provider for Harvester. So there is already a couple of community pull requests, and there have been basically 2 versions in the last 2 weeks. So it's an active project. And there's also the Cluster API provider for RKE2, which is maintained by the CAPI team. It's very active and works quite well already. And then, so these are 2 repositories that might be very useful to you. And if you'd like to check out the automation that's created for this workshop, which seems like it doesn't work, but it actually does if you limit yourself below the rate limits of Equinix, then there is a nice module to deploy Rancher on Harvester on Equinix. Okay, so you will have at the end what we have here basically. You have a Rancher that is working with a domain name, a Let's Encrypt certificate, and a Harvester that is included and already imported in Rancher. So that's the automation. And there is another one which today did not work correctly because I didn't have the right prerequisites, inputs. And it's the post install, which installs a router or DHCPD VM to provide DHCP service to all the VMs that you will deploy on Harvester. It will deploy their VM networks, so the VLANs and the attachments to the actual physical ports, and SSH keys and VM images and stuff like that. And today, it's not working because of that second one that failed on me. Cool. So yeah, thank you very much. I really had very high hopes about the workshop and having you do stuff hands-on. Unfortunately, because of these rate limitations, had all these issues. But hopefully, you will be able to check out these 4 repositories, and you can recreate. If you do have an Equinix account, you can recreate all of this using that automation. Okay, so I really invite you to do that, and you can test end-to-end the whole thing using these scripts. Thank you.